Welcome back to The Operators, the podcast where we talk to the people actually running medical practices, the physicians, the managers, the staff, everyone who keeps healthcare moving. And today I'm sitting down with Dr. Tracie Rivera. Dr. Tracie is a board certified psychiatrist with over 17 years of experience spanning VA hospitals, community mental health, and child and adolescent psychiatry. She's practiced everywhere from LA to West Virginia to Virginia. But what makes Dr. Tracie's story particularly interesting for this show is her journey through traditional psychiatric practice and her decision to create something entirely new on the other side. She's developed her own approaches called forensic empathy and containment, and her work now focuses on trauma decoding, nervous system regulation, and what she calls rescue missions for people walking out of emotional captivity. Dr. Tracie, welcome to the operators.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cleveland. What a wonderful intro. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. And you call yourself a human being first. I think I saw that on your
Mhm.
website before anything else. So tell me about that human being. Where did you grow up? What was your path towards medicine?
Well, like you mentioned, I I I own Davis Ferguson LLC. It's like a conglomerate of companies, and as the world fractures people, I build systems that hold them. That's what we do. We build systems that hold them. And so I grew up in a pretty fractured environment myself. I was the youngest of 10 growing up in the west side and south side of Chicago. My mom was a single mom. The latter part of her life, actually, after she had me, I was the last one. And my father was a veteran in Korean War, Army veteran. Thank you, everyone, for your service. That's why I have a special heart for the veterans. And my mom worked in the service industry. She was a cook at some of the top restaurants in the world on the Gold Coast in Chicago. And she was a domestic with my grandmother. They cleaned houses for some of the richest people in the world there that lived in Chicago, Lake Michigan area, old money as we call it. And so I grew up in an apartment there on the south side. That's where we mostly lived. My dad lived on the west side, and there was eight of us in a one bedroom. And so I looked around and I said, I don't think I want this to be my future. And so I said, what can I do to change that? And that's when I started dreaming. That was probably around, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old.
And so you started thinking about healthcare and what kind of like pushed you specifically down that path? Was it something from childhood that you had an experience and you're like, hey, like I really want to help people, or was it something completely different?
And I have no clue. I didn't grow up around doctors. My grandmother was a sharecropper. My grandfather was a sharecropper, which means that they got the land when slavery was abolished. They were able to rent the land and or purchase it and kind of till and toe the same land that they actually took care of as slaves. So I didn't know anybody that actually had a higher education. I did have an aunt, a great aunt that was a teacher who kind of raised my mom when my grandmother was in the fields. So that's where my mother got a love for education, but I didn't know anyone. So at 5 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a surgeon and live in San Diego. Now, where I got that from, I don't even know. So I would have this convertible and I would drive it around on the hard, kind of rough of wooden floors there in our dilapidated apartment in Chicago. And I would say, I'm driving my convertible, well, in San Diego, and I'm going to be a doctor. And that was it. I had made a decision at 5 I was going to be a doctor, and I became a doctor, and that was it. But I didn't become a surgeon. I found out I didn't want to be a surgeon in medical school when we did a rotation, and I realized I would have to live in the hospital.
And I guess this is just in the back of my head because I used to serve in the Canadian Army, and thank you to your father's service and having served in the Korean War. I mean, it's often labeled to be the forgotten war. And one really
Yes.
good memoir that I read on it was About Face by Colonel David Hackworth. I just had to pull it out because I forgot the exact name.
Okay.
Really, it's like a really long book, and a lot of it spans kind of his journey throughout the Korean War. Very, very
Wow.
interesting time in history. And
Mhm.
for you, when it comes to psychiatry, was there anything that drew you specifically into that specialization?
Great question. My mom eventually became a pastor. We moved to California when I was pretty young, around about 8 or 9. So I really kind of consider California, home for me. I spent most of my formative years yet there. And so she became a pastor, and we were required to go with her as long as it was allowed when she did her chaplain services in the prison. So all of the kids were required to go with her. So we would rotate. Definitely when she's going to homeless shelters or doing street ministry, we used to call it, I think people still do it, passing out tracts. So we would stand on the corner, pass out tracts, witness to people. But I think what really hit me is that we would go into the prison when she had our chaplain services. And I would just watch her work. And I just realized when someone had a listening ear and they really listened and they heard you and they understood, that it could be just life changing. So I knew if I wasn't going to do surgery, I thought about psychiatry, but I wasn't sure. But then when I did my rotation at St. Elizabeth in Washington D.C., one of the most infamous state psychiatric hospital or government-run psychiatric hospitals, that's when I knew. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I was able to bridge that counseling and medicine, and that was it. No looking back for me.
Being the daughter of a military man and a pastor, very kind of, I imagine a lot of discipline, and then
Yeah.
coupled with visiting um, prison or jail for the chaplain services,
Mhm.
it's one of the like most intense environments you can find yourself in. At which point did you realize like, hey, I want to specialize in child and adolescent psychiatry as well? What pulled you in that direction?
I've always loved working with kids. My mom was she had quite a bit of roles in our church, and one of them is she was the director of the child spiritual education program that we had there. So I was the only one out of all 9 of us that wanted to help her in the Sunday school. She would say, "Who wants to volunteer?" And everybody would look down and at their feet. So I helped her, and I liked it. I actually liked working with the kids. And then when I went to college, I also became a tutor. So I was always a mentor in tutoring the younger classes, the freshmen and things of that nature. So I always kind of felt like working with the youth was something I enjoyed. I had a wonderful job at the University of California, Riverside, where I did a youth program where we went into the schools and we helped disadvantaged students apply for college and succeed and increase their matriculation rate and their acceptance rate. So I did that. So it was something I was always doing, kind of working with the youth and younger crowd, although they weren't too much younger than me. But it just felt like, that downstream effect, like working with the people that you were helping them come up the ladder, it just always appealed to me. So my program, I was chief resident at West Virginia University School of Medicine residency program. Go Mountaineers! Woohoo! I was chief resident there, and the director of the child and adolescent department saw me do several rotations with the kids and things of that nature, and said, "Would you be considered? Would you consider doing a fellowship with us?" And I said, "Absolutely." I hadn't been thinking about it, and so when she approached me, I was like, "Okay, that's a sign." So I moved forward, and I worked with kids. I was part time there, but it was still quite rewarding and quite fulfilling. And that's where I really think I earned my chops. I first started earning my chops as a psychiatrist in that particular those rotations with my fellowship, my child fellowship.
And since then, have you sort of stayed within that niche of patients, or do you now serve like a broader scope of all ages?
Mr. Cleveland, I am so blessed. My youngest patient has been a preemie. My oldest patient has been 91. So I work with all age groups. My preemies, I work with them to, especially if it's a failure to thrive, if we're trying to help a preemie that was born early bond with their mother, help them be able to have a zest and a will to live show the mother how to comfort the infant, how to lactate, how to bond. And we do that in child psychiatry. It's actually so rewarding and wonderful when you see a healthy infant go home with a healthy mom. We also detox a lot of pregnant women that unfortunately addicted to substances. I do that as well. And then I'm with them when the baby's born and help them with bonding as well. And then I've had patients as, like I said, as old as, I think the oldest I've had was 91. I may have had one in the hundreds. Like, don't quote me on that. But I ran a dementia clinic when I was at West Virginia University School of Medicine residency program. Once again, go Mountaineers. And so I got to learn about end stage life and learn about caregiver fatigue. And so I've been really blessed to do the whole spectrum, to when they first enter the world to when they're on their way out to glory. So I've been really blessed.
Take me back to a typical day when you were in full-time clinical practice. What time did you start and what did your schedule look like?
Well, full-time clinical, well, my day starts at 3:30, but that's just me.
AM?
I'm what's that?
3:30 AM?
Yes, not PM, AM. Yeah,
Wow.
it's been pretty life changing. I actually started doing that right before COVID, and I think it actually helped get me through COVID. That's my time to kind of be quiet, meditate, pray, journal. And then and if I'm going to work out, if it's on my schedule to do that, I do that by then. And then I start timing my emails. That's been like a lifesaver, timed emails. So by the time I get into the hospital or clinic at 8 or 9, my emails are already sent. Everyone's already received them. They review them. And so my replies come early so I can get moved forward with my day. And then I might start rounding around 8 or 9, depending on my shift. Sometimes it could be a long day if I'm doing inpatient, because I do inpatient, outpatient, telehealth, forensics, do competency to stand trial. I help patients with that. So I do a bunch of gamut. So depending on the site that I'm working at for that day, I can end at 6. Or if it's a good day, it's a half day. I'm ending at not necessarily a good day, but a shorter day, I'm ending at 12. But right now, I'm doing more neuroaesthetics. So that's a whole different schedule. And we could get to that in a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, 3:30 p.m. Usually the funny thing is like I'm out of
8
Eastern
a.m.
Europe.
a.m.
AM, sorry, 3:30 AM. For me, like my day typically starts at 2 p.m. Like for the working hours because I'm traveling Eastern Europe right now, and 2 p.m. is 9 a.m. in on the East Coast. So uh that's crazy early for me personally. Even having had the military routine of like having to wake up at 3:30,
Yeah.
4 a.m. for the stand-ups, I never enjoyed it. I was always a night owl. But psychiatry
It's
is
life changing. Try to get back to it if you can. It's pretty like the world is quiet at 3:30, and you hit what's called theta waves, which means that you are waking up. You're not quite awake, but you're not quite asleep, and then that's when you can maximize your vision board, because that means that everything that you do, perceive, read, or ingest. That's why I'm meditating that time, praying, planning my life, my day, my future. Everything you do, you record it, and your mind and body has no choice but to repeat it and make it come forward. So that's why that's the key. That's when you have theta waves between 3 and 4 in the morning. So if you can wake up, do your vision board, plan. I do a lot of audio visual. So I'll have my headphones on. It'll be my own voice. I'll be saying, okay, your whatever my goals are, whether it's fitness, finance, I'll have my voice telling me that I'm going to achieve that. I'll actually have a video playing, sometimes a YouTube video or something, and it'll be playing what I want to see, whether it's my house that I purchased that I visualize, or my practice the way it's evolving now, visualizing that. So that's when you record it, you turn the recording off, and as you go out through your day, your life has no choice but to manifest the recording that you fed yourself in the morning. No choice.
absolutely. And for me, like how important is it to have sunlight first thing in the morning? Does it matter at all that you're not really seeing any sun for like the next 5-ish hours, 4-ish hours?
Your body already has a hormone or rhythm set up. We have so many different rhythms. The hormonal rhythm that you're referring to actually taps into the circadian rhythm, which means that there's a certain time where your body when you're in perfect harmony and health, that your releases a hormone for you to sleep, which we know endogenous is melatonin. And then it pulls back the melatonin as it's time to wake up. And then your cortisol level spikes in the morning. I know people probably don't know that. It spikes because it's telling your body it's your own internal alarm to wake up and move forward to get ready for your day. So that's actually timed with the sunlight. So by the time your cortisol levels spike at a certain time in the morning, it could depend on the person. I don't want to really, I would have to find out what my patient's shifts were like. Some people work those split shifts, right? Or they work overnight shifts. So their cortisol could be different spikes. So if let's
Mhm.
say you're on a typical weather, excuse me, a typical a regular rhythm, your cortisol is going to spike around, I would say between 5 to 7, somewhere in there. So, and that should be right around the time the sun's coming up. So your body's already timed for that. So you
Mhm.
want to go ahead and get your sunlight, go for your walk, open your windows, journal on the patio instead of in your, your room with the curtains drawn. When that sun starts coming up, then you expose your body to the sun. So your body's already timed for that. So that's a great question, though.
Mhm. Mhm. And like for me personally, because I'm in Latvia, it's the sun goes down at like 3:30 p.m. and it doesn't really come out anyway. I usually don't see it for weeks because it's so cloudy and
Yes.
so rainy here. And I know one of the things that our CEO suggested to me is like, yeah, man, you got to get like a light lamp, some sort of a light lamp to get the sun going. But
Yes. Phototherapy. You have to make sure you have the right, work with your therapist or your psychiatrist to make sure you get the right lux, Lux, has to have the right, Lux, the right lux, Lux to make sure it's enough light. There's a certain amount that you need. But he's right. Whoever your CEO is, good recommendation.
Yeah, he's a big time biohacker, Shukri Katan, and he's very big into longevity as well. And when it comes to psychiatry can be very heavy work. How did you manage the emotional weight of carrying other people's stories day after day?
Yeah, well, that's one thing they actually teach us in residency and in training. You have to compartmentalize. So you have to be able to do your work and impact your patients, and show up for them healthy, whole, and ready to listen and hold that space for them. And then you have to be able to leave that at work and then go and enjoy your life in a healthy, well-rounded manner. So you learn that. So our training is about 4 years for the residency and typically 2 years for the fellowship. So you're about 6 years of training and how to do that. We learn it actually pretty early. And my colleagues and my peers, they had different ways they did that. For me, it was going to always be spiritual for me that I would have, that separation before I went into work and also when I left work. And also physical activity. If I had a shift where I worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., it was called the night float. Then when I got done at 7 a.m., from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., I would go to the gym and I would have my meditative time because I had to go home and go to sleep to be ready for my 7 p.m. shift. So that was actually my page turner for my day. So you have to have a way that you compartmentalize mentally, physically, and whatever that looks like for you. And they encourage that, and they actually trained us how to do that.
Would you say that your history of spending that time with your mom and doing the chaplain services really helped and it prepared you for the psychiatrical work?
Yeah,
Did it
most
feel
definitely.
easier once you stepped into residency?
I believe so. I think it actually helped me in undergrad. I had quite a rigorous and accomplished undergrad. It helped me in medical school. It helped me in residency, and it definitely made a difference when I was practicing. I felt like I had a head start. I had one veteran tell me, "I think you've been doing this before you were born," and that was the greatest compliment I had ever received in my life. Obviously, clearly, I hadn't been, but what he was saying is that it was such just a natural and effortless way for me to help patients, the way that I was helping patients, that it was beyond training. And I never forgot that compliment.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
Diving more so into operations of how clinical practices work and from your experience, looking back at your time in traditional practice settings, what actually worked? What did they get right?
Let me see, what did we get right? I guess for us, I mean, and it may seem kind of small, but what we got right is appointment reminders. I know that probably sounds like, oh, that's boring, but you want to be able to utilize those slots that you have in place when a patient's booked, right? So if a patient's booked, you don't want to be sitting from, sometimes my clinics would start at 7 a.m. at the VA. You don't
Mhm.
want to be sitting from 7:15, 7:30 to like 9 o'clock because you have a bunch of no-shows. And then you have a waiting list of veterans that can't get in, right? So what we did really successful at the VA, I've been at several VAs across the country, is that the appointment reminders to let people know that you have an appointment. See if they can confirm. If they can't confirm, great. If they need to reschedule, do it then during the reminder so we can slide someone that's on the waiting list right into that slot. So I know it doesn't sound, too exciting, but that's actually very successful for the flow of clinical care.
No, it's super vital. Like people are busy. People have their own meetings, their own life, and then sometimes they just forget that, hey, I do have this appointment. And for me, I live and die by my calendar. So if I haven't recorded in my Google Calendar, I have no clue that I have that appointment or I have that meeting. And in that case, what would you say? We talked about what kind of worked for your clinic practice or within your experience, appointment reminders being a very key thing. What was broken? What were the biggest operational pain points you experienced in specifically psychiatric practice?
I say the biggest operational pain points were probably been scheduling. If someone is if you're double booked, somebody's not going to see a doctor that day, and that's unfortunate, especially if we have veterans that are commuting. Or even my private practice, I didn't have that problem because I definitely control my schedule. But we have veterans that are commuting or things of that nature. It makes it
Mhm.
very tough if you're double booked. So scheduling was something that that we ended up perfecting, or that I saw throughout the locations that I had been working at. But I would say that was probably one of the ones.
Would EMR not prevent you, or was it before the days of you guys using EMRs that the double booking happened?
Well, I'm a contractor. Let me just say that first and foremost. And so I don't speak on behalf of the Veterans Affairs Office, but just my experience, just in all, whether it's private practice, group practices, private clinics, government clinics, whichever. Um, for the most part, my private practice, I had much more control of my calendar, so I could really kind of see hit and miss here and there. But when you're working with large hospital systems, there's typically always going to be an EMR where you're actually doing the scheduling.
Mhm.
But you just want to be careful that you are booking people where it's a one person slot, because that's the only challenge that we probably had. Logistics was just the double booking. It didn't happen often, but when it did happen, we had to shuffle patients around real time, and that's kind of tough. Yeah.
And what is that booking like? Maybe it varies from clinic to clinic, or depending on whether or not it's like a full time role at a clinic versus subcontractor. But specifically in your use case, what was that journey towards booking a patient look like? Did you even have access to the EMR, or was it more so that someone texted you or emailed you like, "Hey, you have this person booked for X time, and now you have to like manually enter it yourself into your own schedule"?
Wonderful question. Yeah, when only time I ever had access to my schedule is when I had my private practice. You don't typically, when you're working with these large particular institutions and or organizations, you don't have access to your schedule. You tell someone when you want to schedule an appointment, and they schedule it. You have to understand that I've worked in 10 different states, territories, throughout the United States and also the Caribbean. So I've dealt with different EMRs. Each one is different. I'm licensed in 7 states. So, or I've been licensed in 7 states at one time. So yeah, it's different what EHRs and EMRs are using, but I've never really been anywhere where I've had access to my own schedule. So you typically tell someone that's running the front desk, that might be your mental health support team, and then they handle your schedule in the front desk. And and it kind of comes through. Probably you pull up a schedule that day when you get in, depending on what EHR I'm using and which state in their country I'm in. You pull up your schedule, you have your patients there, and then you probably have an inbox that tells you if there's any changes or add-ons. And what's really great is if they can let the doctor know if you have an open slot, like somebody cancels open slot, and they ask you before you fill it. Because sometimes a patient calls you and say, "Hey, can I come at 10 o'clock?" And you're like, "Sure, I have an opening." And then you tell them they'll come at 10 o'clock. By the time you walk up to the front desk says, "Oh, we just put somebody in there." So when they started giving us a call, no matter where I was at, and letting us know that, "Hey, I want to put somebody here at 10 o'clock. Is it okay?" We'd be like, "Wonderful," because sometimes we would fill that in the back end and they didn't know it. So that's what would happen sometimes with the double booking.
What has been your experience with the different tech that you've seen and tried? Do you have like EMRs that you prefer? Do you have systems for notifications that, like let's say an appointment gets booked, you automatically get an SMS letting you know that, hey, at that 10 a.m. slot that was open is now booked up. Do you have any preferred systems that you rely on day to day?
Well, now with my neuro aesthetic practice, I've been using the Calendly, what I learned through LinkedIn. And I am old school. I do use Google Calendar, Google Meets. So I use that too. I don't know if that's not cool or hip, but I love it. It's a great product. So what I'm doing now is I'm going into internal spaces and interior spaces. I'm doing both. So I have to have a lot more flexibility, and I use quite a bit of AI with what I'm doing now.
And so when you say that you have to use quite a bit of AI, like what kind of AI have you implemented? What have you seen work and not work?
Well, some of the AI I have proprietary, so I can't discuss all of it. But
Absolutely.
common things that you might know, which are Grok and ChatGPT, with my neuroaesthetic practice, and also with my Dr. Tracie MD website, drtraciemd.com. I've done a lot of AI to build the website, to help me build the website. With my neuroaesthetic practice, because it's quite visual, and what I do with my neuroaesthetics, we go into people's home and we build spaces that hold them. We build walls and surrounding that regulate their nervous system. And so whether I'm doing a mock-up of a space to get approved for my client or for my design team to kind of figure out, okay, how we're going to lay out different colors and where we're going to put the water fountain to help with regulation, or what scents do we want to use to help them ease into sleep. We'll set that up and mock that up with different AI tools and things of that nature. But yeah, so it's been exciting times. It's easier and faster. It's faster too.
Yeah, everything. It's just it's a force multiplier. There's so much more that we can do now as uh, a startup that our one of our main products is AI. In fact, we have 7 different AI agents that help with all levels of communication and patient physician interaction, scribe, AI voice, SMS, email interactions,
Yeah.
documentation, revenue cycle management. And speaking of, like, let's say the RCM and prior auth processes, psychiatry has
Mm.
some unique challenges, prior authorizations for medications, bed shortages, crisis response. What systematic issues were most frustrating for you as a practicing psychiatrist?
Yeah, you almost made my eye twitch when you said prior off. So that would be probably it. That's the pain point. Yeah,
That
that'd
was
be
the
number
biggest
one.
kind of bottleneck for you.
With prior offs,
Yeah.
patients not being able to get their medication. I mean, especially when you're working with kids, and if they a true diagnosis of ADHD, it is managed with psychopharmacology. And some schools can't manage the patient if they're not medicated. So this stops kids even from going to school. You see the challenge there? So
Mhm.
I'm not dealing with it, but somebody's dealing with an insurance company that's actually kind of preventing a kid from really being able to go back to school and continue their education, right? If they don't have the medication. So it's that crucial for some of my patient population. So that's a bottleneck. That's one of the most severe and concerning ones. Yeah.
Would you say that was like 10% of the cases, 50% of the cases where you ran into this issue with prior auth?
It was quite a bit. I never really thought about the numeric percentage of, but if I had to give it a number, especially when you're talking about, I do a lot of psychiatry in poor populations, underserved, underbanked, um, and low income. So I would say it's probably about 60 to 70%. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how much of your energy went to fighting the system versus actually like practicing medicine?
Well, like again, I'm pretty blessed that I've worked with so many different institutions where they would have some of those things in place for as a physician, you wouldn't have to do that tug of war. But there's some facilities that don't have that. Like they can't afford to have a prior auth representative. That's what they do all day, right? If they're in a low income area and they're getting a lot of their reimbursements from government insurance and a lot of their funding is tied up in Washington and things of that nature. So it just depends on where you were. So the places where you had someone that was dedicated to that, we had a much higher success rate. The places where we're seeing patients and we're dedicated to that while we're seeing patients, it would take us sometimes longer because you can only call the prior auth and things of that nature when the different pharmacies and insurance companies are open. And that's typically the time that you're putting out fires, dealing with families. So yeah, it just depends on where you were about the success rate or the quickness of that you got it completed and effectiveness of it. Yeah.
And you did briefly mention before something around internal spaces and interior spaces. Is this specifically like the design and how it's attached to mental health? Or mind elaborating a little bit on that? I'm curious to learn
Yeah.
about
So,
that side of the business.
yeah. So Davis Ferguson LLC, like I said, is a conglomerate of companies. And we're really about in this time where people are fractured, whether it's internally, that's your mind, body, spirit, or interior, that's your actual physical space where you live. We're building those spaces where they can be held, where the walls can actually hug them in the interior space. So we use sight, sound, touch, depending on how far I'm going, sometimes taste. And we create a space that regulates the nervous system, and we do that based on kind of what the client tells me what they want. So they're saying, I want a space where I kind of feel held. I've been through quite a lot. I want to come to this space. I want to feel like I belong and I beloved. And they kind of express to me how they want to feel in the space. We create that. We recreate that for their nervous system. And that's been extremely rewarding. It's not therapy. It's not treatment. It's not medicine. It's building a wellness space in your home or your office. I've done offices as well. I'm actually about to start another office now. And so that space envelops you every day. So you have your own retreat built in. You don't have to go to a spa. You don't have to go to Sedona. Just go to your room or to your house.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've been thinking about it, having moved a few times over the past few years, including countries and provinces. It's
Mhm.
like sooner or later, I just end up adding so many different things into the space and making it my own. And I want to claim that, hey, like I'm the kind of guy that can just, set up a mat on the floor and sleep on the floor and just have my computer and work for my laptop, and it doesn't
Oh,
matter. But like historically, that's just not true. Like I just end up slowly over time adding like gadgets, paintings, little statues. I have a little statue of Caesar on my desk. Like ultimately, like our surroundings add to that, not just
yes.
ambiance, but it gives us energy, gives us mental clarity as well. Like I wouldn't be able to begin work if there is a whole bunch of clutter on my desk. I love keeping my space clean. Any extra coffee cups, I love putting them away. And when it comes to the office space and productivity, what would you say
Mhm.
is like the number one or the top three things for office mental health space?
Well, before I get to office mental health space, I had to. You had a cot on the floor with your, or a mat on the floor with your computer. Ooh, I had to, I had to kind of wave my finger at that one because you're exactly right. It does make a difference. And what we found is that if you live in a space and you have a lot of clutter, when you declutter, it actually helps your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, which would make sense, right? So I wanted to go back to the cot on the mat because I had a client and they don't mind me sharing this. I had a client and I didn't change their bed. It was the same bed they had for 25 years. I changed the colors, obviously, and changed excuse me, different things in the room, but I changed the weight of the blanket and I plugged in a scent behind the bed to help them ease into sleep. And I changed the fabric, the weight of the fabric, and I changed, like I said, some of the colors. And they had been there 20 plus years. And the night when I finished the project, she said, in the 20 plus years they've been there, that was the best night's sleep they ever had. And I just changed certain elements. So the weight of the blanket affected the body temperature, which helps you ease into different layers of sleep. The scent helped them ease into the sleep and remain in the different sleep stages. It's called architecture of sleep. The colors help soothe them and help regulate their heart rate. And so those are the things as a physician that you kind of like, inside that that an interior designer is not going to know. That's why the neuroaesthetics is so revolutionary. And I'm the only board certified, as you know, double boarded with the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology physician in the world that's neuroestheticians in people's homes. So offices and also office spaces, to go back to your question on office spaces, you really have to have it organized based on if you're left or right handed. Forget about that. And that's some things that sometimes a just typical interior designer won't even think about. Like, what predominant part of your brain do you use if you're left or right handed? So I'll ask the person if they're left or right handed, or I'll watch them write and I'll kind of set up their space and they don't even know I'm doing it based on that. And they're like, oh, everything's so accessible now. It's so easy for me to access. And it's the same items, the same paperclip, the same stapler. It's just I rearrange different things based on the predominant portion of their brain that they utilize. But that's just my secret. They don't know I'm doing that. They may watch this or not, but still, they still won't know I'm really doing it. They'll say, "Oh, I saw her say that, or that she does that." But then when they're actually in the moment and working with a client or on the computer, I've watched how they moved. I watched their manual dexterity. I've watched if they do left or right deviation with their head. All those different subtle things that help you organize and execute your day successfully. You don't even think about. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And I never even thought about it that way. I thought you might mention something maybe around positioning your desk closer to the window, or honestly, I'm not sure. But I never thought about it in a way where it's like, hey, are you left-handed or right-handed? And now that I look at my setup here, like my phone, I'm right-hand dominant. It's literally right there. And so is my water. So is my water actually. And the stuff that I access more rarely, I position further away from myself that's closer towards my left hand. So I guess I did it instinctively, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I never thought about it this way.
Yeah, the brain is pretty fascinating. Yeah. And of course, all those other things that you can find on Google, right? Oh, make sure you have more light and you can Google that and set up your office on your own. But me coming in as a brain scientist, knowing neurology and psychiatry, I bring that part that you can't find on Google. That little tidbit right there that you wouldn't think about too much on how miraculous the brain is and how you can make things easier for your brain to be more efficient and successful in the exact same space. Sometimes I don't even change the furniture. Like, I keep the same furniture, I may change some colors depending on how much, I call it fiscal window, depending on how much you want to spend on the project. But I meet anybody where they are. If they want to spend $500, to thousands of dollars, and I can meet you where you are and set things up that make you more efficient, make your brain more sharp, and just make it ease. And before you know it, you're more productive and you have less interruptions because things are just more smooth and easy for you. Yeah.
Love it. And at some point, you made a decision to step outside traditional clinical practice and create something
Yeah.
new. What was the moment, or was it a series of moments when you knew you had to do
Wow.
something different?
Well, I still practice, but I'm really focusing quite a bit on the neuroaesthetics. So I've always created spaces. I didn't know there was a term for it. I didn't know there was a field. Before I even went to medicine, I've always created spaces. I've been creating spaces for about 30 years. So whether it's for friends or myself, and I knew how you arrange certain things and pick certain colors. Like you could just, affect your mood, and certain art brings out a certain level of emotion, right? You could see a painting and you could feel overwhelmed with joy. You could see a painting, you could feel sad and cry. So I already knew all of that, and I've been doing it for 30 years for myself, for my friends, for free. And I thought it was called interior design. So when they coined the term neuroaesthetics, I'm like, that's what I've been doing since I was like little. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. So I actually decided to someone encouraged me to set up one of my homes for an Airbnb. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I finished the space. And when I finished the space, actually, let me back up. I had bought my home and I redesigned it and I finished the space and I was like, this is so beautiful. I want to share it. And they're like, someone said, set it up as an Airbnb. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I set up for Airbnb. I set up the furniture a certain way so they can maximize in the sunlight and things of that nature. And then my reviews came in and they were just interesting. People were like, oh my God, this felt more than a vacation. I felt like I had an emotional reset. This is the most therapeutic home I've ever stayed. They used the word therapeutic home they've ever stayed in ever on Airbnb. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, what if I created this for them in their own home or created this for anybody that wanted it? So even if they can't afford, because we're pinching pennies sometimes, Mr. Cleveland, and sometimes things are tight,
100%.
they can't afford to go on a vacation, right? They could actually have their own wellness retreat every day they came home from work or school, or have a room that held them when they in that moment, that tough moment. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do 1 million wellness spaces by 2035. Now I don't know why I said that, but that's what I said. I said, oh, and so I actually walked down the street to my neighbors and said, hey, look what I've been doing. He happened to be also be a physician. And I was like, this has been amazing. We can scale this. We can build physician retreats. We can help. And he was like, I'm in. And that was my first client. And the rest is history.
I love it. And if everything goes the way you're hoping, what does your work look like in 2 to 3 years? Is it serving a million plus spaces and creating kind of these mental health incubators? What does it look like for you? What does success 2 to 3 years down the line look like for you?
Wonderful question. So the wellness spaces, whether it's an office, a home, really would love to take it into the hospitals. I've already done a private practice office for a physician. I'm doing an office for someone in the real estate business. So I would like to do a grander scale, then take it into the hospitals, take it into hotels. This could go anywhere and everywhere around the world. That's why I truly feel the million spaces by 2035 is not too far off because there's so many different types of spaces that I can create. And so that's what it would look like for the next 2 to 3 years for me to have a grander spell, excuse me, a grander reach and larger spaces. I would really like to go back to one of the hospitals that I practiced at as a child and adolescent psychiatrist and recreate the inpatient unit with different colors and safe, bodily friendly fabrics. You have to be careful with that in the hospitals. And do the color therapy. So when they come out of group, when they come up from the cafeteria, when they're going to the gym, those colors rise up and meet them, and they're just playing more than basketball. Their body knows it, but they don't know it. And those colors and those different lighting kind of really help them in their wellness journey. I would really love that.
And how do you see tech or AI assisting in that journey and in your vision?
So tech and AI's got to get me some customers to get my name out there. That's what it's going to need to do, whether it's brainstorming or emailing or showing me different ways to get mass exposure. That's where I want to lean on for tech and AI recruitment, and also maybe recruitment of staff and support team. Obviously, if I'm the bigger the spaces, the more hands I need. We have a nice intimate team now, but as we grow, we'll need more. So those were some of the places where tech and AI can come in for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds very much in line with what we've seen other physicians look for with tech,
Yeah.
whether it be patient reactivation, communication,
Mhm.
the very kind of boring stuff that takes them away from interacting and really helping the patient, and just practice medicine. They want to offload all of that um, operations and communication work to someone else, and they should, because ultimately they studied to help with medicine as opposed to be typing emails or being on the phone all day.
Yeah. Yeah, the necessary groundwork, but as people say sometimes is, not too exciting, right? Not too sexy, right? But it's got to be done. Got to be done.
100%. Dr. Tracie, this has been an awesome, awesome conversation. Before we go, is there anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure people hear?
Well, they can start with drtraciemd.com. It talks about I do teaching workshops, individual groups. They can set that up there. They can also, it's called sponsor a soul. If there's someone they know that would benefit from having an individual workshop or a class with me, I have an option there to sponsor a soul through our trust fund program. I created that program. It's called Trust Fund because it's time for us to trust one another. And also, they can go to Davis Ferguson LLC or davisferguson.com, and it's my company, Davis Ferguson LLC, and look at some of the interior spaces that we've been working on. But Dr. Tracie MD is probably the first place to stop. It's in one location. My Instagram page is growing. They can find some of my neuro cinema, where I create cinematic experiences, short films that help you have an emotional response and take you on an emotional journey. I'm at 18,000 followers and growing there. So they can also stop by my Instagram. And I'm on every platform there possibly is. But if you start with drtraciemd.com, you can find me there, and everything's listed there, all the links.
Sounds awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Tracie. And if you like the episode, check out our other conversations with physicians and practice
I
operators
will.
at the Operators Podcast. And we'll see you next time.